children.
It was evening. Edward had had a busy day, and as he stopped at the last station before the junction, he was looking forward to getting home. Beep beep! Get in quickly, please, he whistled to the passengers. The passengers got in quickly, and Edward's driver pulled the lever. But Edward found that he couldn't move. The driver checked Edward's brakes, but nothing seemed to be wrong. He scratched his head. Whatever can be the matter? He wondered. He gave Edward more steam. This time Edward started, but went only a little way before he stopped with a groan. It's no good, the driver said to the fireman. Something is holding us back. Go and see if the guard can help, please. The fireman jumped down to the platform and ran along to the guard's van. What's up? Demanded the guard. Reckon the brakes have seized on, said the fireman. Is yours off all right? Should be, replied the guard, and he tried to turn the handle, but it wouldn't move. The fireman helped, but they still couldn't turn it. So they called the driver, but it made no difference. The brake handle had stuck fast. We shall miss Henry's connection at the junction if we can't start soon, said the driver. Let's give Edward everything he's got and hope for the best. It'll be hard work, he told Edward, but I'm sure you'll do your best. Rather doubtfully, Edward agreed. Come on! Come on! Come on! He puffed fiercely. Smoke and steam poured from his funnel, and slowly the train moved after him. Once they were moving, things became easier. But Edward found that he couldn't go fast however hard he tried. Oh dear, he said. I'm sure we'll miss Henry's train. Then, suddenly, there was a jerk, and everything was easy. They reached the junction quickly, and while the passengers changed into Henry's train, Edward's fireman went to find out what had been wrong with the guard's brake. One tiny nut, he told them when he came back. It broke and jammed itself against the brake, so that we couldn't turn the handle. Then after we started, the brake itself broke, so that we could move properly. The driver laughed. Come on, Edward, he said. Let's get that guard's van into a siding where it can be mended. Who would have thought that one small nut could cause so much trouble?
James was feeling sorry for himself. I'm getting old, he grumbled to the other engines one morning. I can't get about like I used to. It's alright for you younger ones, but my wheels are getting stiff. Edward, Gordon and Henry had all been on the Fat Controller's railway for much longer than James, but they didn't say so. At last, Henry got tired of James's complaints. Poor old Groaner, he said. It's no use you just sitting there moaning. Why don't you tell the Fat Controller that you're past it? James didn't like that idea. Not all old engines, so he had heard, were preserved. Some, they said, were sold for scrap. Best not, he said nervously, shuddering a little at the thought. The night goods left the big station at midnight. Usually one of the Fat Controller's diesels pulled it, but one was away and the other was being mended. James had to take it instead, and grumbled dreadfully about it. All this extra shunting, he snorted indignantly. It's too much for an old engine like me. A few days later, an inspector came to the shed. People who live near the yard are complaining, he said. They say there's a sort of groaning noise that's been keeping them awake at night. I don't remember hearing anything, said James's driver. We were there until midnight. That's right, agreed the inspector. That's when they say it stopped. It's probably only James moaning and groaning with his extra shunting, suggested Henry cheekily. Shut up, retorted James. If you had to shunt at night, you'd moan and groan louder than anyone. That night, James's driver and fireman listened carefully. It is you, James, they said at last. Your brake blocks aren't holding your wheels properly, and when they rub against each other, they make a groaning sound. Oh dear, said James mournfully. The Fat Controller acted at once. I can't have complaints about my railway, he ordered. Donald and Douglas shall take turns on the midnight goods until the diesels return. James must have his brakes seen to at once. James was pleased not to have to pull the midnight goods, and even happier at not having to shunt in the night. But even though his brakes were mended, the nickname of Old Groaner stuck for several weeks afterward.
A special train arrived one day, and the Fat Controller welcomed the passengers. They looked at everything in the yard and photographed the engines. Duck's driver let some of them ride in his cab. They're the Railway Society, his driver explained. They've come to see us. Their engine's City of Truro. He was the first to go 100 miles an hour. Let's get finished, then we can go and talk to him. Oh, said Duck awed. He's too famous to notice me. Rubbish, smiled his driver. Come on. Duck found City of Truro at the coaling stage. May I talk to you? He asked shyly. Of course, smiled the famous engine. I see you are one of us. I try to teach them our ways, said Duck modestly. All ship-shape and Swindon fashion, that's right. Please, could you tell me how you beat the South-Western? So, City of Truro told Duck all about his famous run from Plymouth to Bristol more than 50 years ago. They were soon firm friends and talked Great Western till late at night. City of Truro left early next morning. Good riddance, grumbled Gordon. Chattering all night, keeping important engines awake. Who is he anyway? He's City of Truro. He's famous. As famous as me? Nonsense. He's famouser than you. He went 100 miles an hour before you were drawn or thought of. So he says. But I didn't like his looks. He's got no dome, said Gordon darkly. Never trust domeless engines. They're not respectable. I never boast, Gordon continued modestly.
What
But 100 miles an hour would be easier for me. Goodbye. Presently, Duck took some trucks to Edward Station. He was cross, but it was lucky for those trucks that they tried no tricks. Hello, called Edward. The famous City of Truro came through this morning. He whistled to me. Wasn't it kind? He's the finest engine in the world, said Duck. And he told Edward about City of Truro and what Gordon had said. Don't take any notice, soothed Edward. He's just jealous. He thinks no engine should be famous but him. Look, he's coming now. He did it, I'll do it. He did it, I'll do it, he panted. His train rocketed past and was gone. Edward chuckled and winked at Duck. Gordon's trying to do a City of Truro, he said. Duck was still cross. I should think he'll knock himself to bits, he snorted. I heard something rattle as he went through. Gordon's driver eased him off. Steady, boy, he said. We aren't running a race. We are, then, said Gordon. He said to himself. Soon Gordon began to feel a little queer. The top of my boiler seems funny, he thought. It's just as if something was loose. I'd better go slower. But by then, it was too late. They met the wind on the viaduct. Gordon thought it wanted to push him off the bridge. No, you don't, he said firmly. The wind had other ideas. It curled round his boiler, crept under his loose dome, and lifted it off and away into the valley below. It fell on the rocks with a clang. Gordon was most uncomfortable. He felt cold where his dome wasn't. Besides, people laughed at him as he passed. At the big station, he tried to whoosh them away, but they crowded round no matter what he did. On the way back, he wanted his driver to stop and find his dome. He was very cross when he wouldn't. He hoped the shed would be empty. But all the engines were there waiting. "Never trust Domeless Engines," said a voice. "They aren't respectable."
"Honestly, Edward," James grumbled, "a diesel on your branch line? That bloke is a bad omen, I tell you." "Is he?" asked Edward. "He is," James snapped. "He acts innocent, but he'll swipe your rails from right beneath your wheels. Before you know it, his pals from the other railway will squirm in and take our places on the main line. I won't have it." "I had no idea he'd caused you such distress. We can't have that." James smirked triumphantly. "Go on then. What's he done to you?" What? He must have done something absolutely vile to have affected you so deeply," Edward went on, "and we must address it." "Well, in fact," Edward interrupted, "I think I hear him coming up the branch. We'll settle this like civilized engines, right here and now." James hastily did his best impression of the guard's whistle, and he hurried away with his wagons, embarrassed.
What's wrong, James?
Scared of a little confrontation?
"Well then," Edward chuckled knowingly, "we'll consider it resolved."
"The Bluebells are coming, oh ho, oh ho, the Bluebells are coming, oh ho. If you must sing, Percy," grumbled Douglas. "Can't you sing in tune? Anyway, our song's about Campbells, and mine's about bluebells. Then it's daft. Bluebells are flowers. Flowers can't come, they grow. My song isn't daft." Percy was indignant. "It is, then. I ken fine about bluebells. We've a song called the Bluebells of Scotland." "But," said Percy triumphantly, "the Bluebells of England are different. They're engines, and one of them's coming with his controller. Didn't you listen," he went on severely, "to the fat controller telling us all about it?" I was away. "Oh dear, I couldn't understand it all, but engines on the other railway aren't safe now. Their controllers are cruel. They don't like engines anymore. They put them on cold, damp sidings. And then," Percy nearly sobbed, they cut them up." "You're right there," agreed Douglas. "If I hadn't escaped, I'd have been cut up too. It's all because of yon diesels. They're all devils," he added fiercely. "Fair play, Douglas," reminded Percy. "Some are nice. Look at Rusty and Daisy." "Maybe so," answered Douglas, "but I'd never trust one myself. But what I cannot understand is all your blether about bluebells." "Well, the Bluebells are kind people who want to save engines. They've made a place in England called the Bluebell Railway. Engines can escape there and be safe, like me winning away here." "Yes," Percy went on, "just like that. If they're old or ill, a fitter makes them well. They can have their own special colours, all the coal and water they need, and pull trains too." "That's braw hearing," said Douglas with feeling. "The fat controller says Stepney was the first engine to escape there, so he's asked him to visit us and bring his controller." "But," objected Douglas, "how about yon diesels? Mightn't they catch him on the way?" "We thought so too," said Percy, "but the fat controller says there's no danger of that. Stepney's a match for any diesel. Besides, his controller will take care of him." "He's a brave engine for all that," said Douglas admiringly. "Fancy fighting his way through all those diesels just to see us." "Look!" squeaked Percy. "The station's crowded." "Silly, how can I look? Unless I be a corkscrew." "Why have they all come? There's no train." But Percy was wrong. The signal dropped, and from far away an engine whistled. A gleam of yellow shone through the bridge girders. "Here he comes!" yelled Douglas. "Boop, boop, beep, beep, boop, boop." The two engines whistled excitedly in welcome. "Beep, beep," replied Stepney. As the passengers came all waving and cheering, he puffed proudly through the junction on the last stage of his long journey. Douglas had taken the midnight goods to a station on the other railway. He was shunting, ready for his return journey, when he heard a faint... "That sounds like an engine," he thought. The came again. This time it sounded almost despairing. "Who's there?" he asked. A whisper came. "Are you a Fat Controller's engine?" "Aye, I'm proud of it. Thank goodness. I'm Oliver. We're escaping to your railway, but we've run out of coal and have no more steam." "Is it from scrap you're escaping?" "Yes. Then it's glad I'll be to help ye. But we maun work fast." Both crews joined in. They took off Oliver's side rods, wrote out transit labels, and chalked scrap everywhere they could. Douglas marshalled Oliver in front of his train. "No time to turn round," he panted. "I maun run tender first." "Hee-hee! Hee-hee! A steamer's escaping! Yoo-hoo!" "Take no notice," he counselled. And they were stopped before they could clear the station's throat. The foreman's lamp shone on Oliver. "Ah!" he exclaimed. "A Western engine!" His light flickered further back. "A Western auto coach? And goods brake too! You can't take these." "Can we no?" said Douglas's driver. "They're all for us. See for yourself." Douglas's guard showed him the labels and papers. Oliver's crew, hiding in the coach, hardly dared to breathe. "Seems in order," said the foreman grudgingly. "But it's queer." "Sure and it is," began the guard. "But I could tell you queerer." "So could I," interrupted the foreman. "Right away, guard." "A near thing," puffed Douglas with relief. "We've had worse," smiled Oliver. "We ran at night. A friendly signalman would pass us from box to box when no trains were about. We got on well till Control heard about a mystery train. Then they tried to hunt us down. What did you do? A signalman let us hide on an old quarry branch. Driver, fireman and guard blocked the cutting with rubbish and levered one of the approach rails away. We stayed there for days, with diesels baying and growling like hounds outside. I was very frightened then." "Small blame to ye," said Douglas feelingly. Presently they rumbled over the bridge and onto the Fat Controller's railway. "We're home. They can't catch you now." "Tell Isabel and Toad, please." Douglas called out the news and heard a joyful ting-a-ling-ling, ting-a-ling-ling. He was surprised. Oliver chuckled. "That's Isabel," he said. "There's a bell on her, you see. She's clever." "He didn't say." Douglas was impressed. "About this Toad," he continued. "Is he—" "What you wished," said his driver. "Yon's the works. We maun slip in unbeknownst and find a place for Oliver." Douglas tried hard to be quiet, but the night foreman heard them and had to be told their secret. "I know just a place," he said, and showed them an empty siding nicely hidden away. Oliver said goodbye and thank you, and Douglas puffed away. "Yon's an enterprising engine," he thought. "I won away here with Donald, but I'd have been feared to do it on my own." At last Douglas could tell his news. They were all excited about it, and agreed that something must be done for Oliver. "I'm feared," said Donald. "Some murdering diesel may creep in, and him there alone, lacking the steam even to whistle for help." "You're right," said James. "He won't be safe till the Fat Controller knows." Douglas should tell him at once. "Is it me speak to the Fat Controller? It's forwarded, think me, and maybe interfering." "Well, here he is," said a cheerful voice. "Now, what's all this about?" Duck broke the awkward silence. "Beg pardon, sir, but we do need another engine." "I agree, Duck. That is why I am giving 7101 another chance." Their faces showed such dismay that the fat controller had difficulty with his own. "Sir," ventured Gordon at last, "we had hoped for a real engine." "They," said the fat controller gravely, "are rare. And unless one escapes, there's little hope." "But, sir," burst out Donald, "one has. And thanks to Douglas, is now at our works," announced the fat controller. "Sir," gasped Douglas, "is there anything you don't know?" "More than you think," he laughed. "Oliver's crew told me all you did, Douglas. Oh, sir, you couldn't see a braw wee engine, and him in trouble, and no do a wheel's turn. More than a wheel's turn, I fancy. Douglas, I'm pleased with you. Oliver, Isabel, and Toad will soon be ours. Oliver and Isabel are just what we need for Duck's branch line." Loud cheers greeted this announcement. "And Toad wants to be your brake van, Douglas." "Thank you, sir. I'd hoped for that. He and I'll do brawly together." That, of course, made everything right. The fat controller soon had Oliver, Isabel, and Toad mended and painted in full Great Western colours. Then he rescued 3 more Western Auto coaches. Duck and Oliver are happy on their branch line. It runs along the coast to the small railway. "We reopened branches," they boast. They're very proud of this indeed. The others laughed at first and called their branch the Little Western. Duck and Oliver were delighted. And now, no one ever thinks of calling it anything else. The fat controller gave Gordon a rest when he came back to London. He told James to do his work. James got very conceited about it. "You know, little Toby," he said one day, "I'm an important engine now. Everybody knows it. They come in crowds to see me flash by. The heaviest train makes no difference. I'm as regular as clockwork. Never late, always on time. That's me." "Says you," replied Toby cheekily. Toby was out on the main line. The fat controller had sent him to the works. His parts were warm. They clanked as he bundled along. He was a little engine, and his tanks didn't hold much water, so he often had to stop for a drink. He had small wheels too. He couldn't go fast. "Never mind," he thought. "The signalmen all know me. They'll give me plenty of time." Toby had wanted to take Henrietta, but the fat controller had said, "No! What would the passengers do without her?" Percy had promised to look after her, but Toby couldn't help worrying. "Percy doesn't understand her like I do," he said. He felt thirsty and tired. He had come a long way. He saw a distant signal. "Good," he thought. "Now I can have a nice drink and rest in a siding till James has gone by." Toby's driver thought so too, but a new signalman had come to one of the stations. They stopped by the water crane. His fireman jumped out and put the hose in his tank. Toby was enjoying his drink when the signalman came up. Toby had never seen him before. "No time for that," said the signalman. "We must clear the road for the express." "Right," said the driver. "We'll wait in the siding." "No good," said the signalman. "It's full of trucks. You'll have to hurry to the next station. They've got plenty of room for you there." Poor Toby clanked sadly away. "I must hurry. I must hurry," he panted. But hurrying used a lot of water, and his tanks were soon empty. They damped down his fire and struggled on, but he soon ran out of steam and stood marooned on the main line, far away from the next station. The fireman walked back. He put detonators on the line to warn James and his driver. "I'll tell that signalman something," he said grimly. James was fuming when Toby's fireman arrived and explained what had happened. "My fault," said the signalman. "I didn't understand about Toby." "No, James," said his driver. "You'll have to push him." "What? Me?" snorted James. "Me? Push Toby? And pull my train?" "Yes, you." "Shan't." The driver, the fireman, the passengers and the guard all said he was a bad engine. All right, grumbled James. He came up behind Toby and gave him a bump. get on, you, he said crossly. James's driver made him push Toby all the way back to the works. It serves you right for being cross, he said. James had to work very hard, and when he reached the workstation, he felt exhausted. Ooh, the express is late. A double header, too. Do you know what I think? I think, he went on, that James couldn't pull the train, so Toby had to help him. Said James, and disappeared in a cloud of steam.
Percy was talking to James in the shed at the big station.
My God was telling me how lonely he gets in his van. I think he ought to take some passengers sometimes. It might cheer him up.
He's not allowed to do that, said James virtuously. It's against the regulations. Guards are important, and passengers might distract them, so that they couldn't look after the train properly.
Oh dear,
Said Percy.
yes, I suppose they might.
They do it on the Midland, put in Gordon. Someone told me about it when I went to Carlisle with that special, but they don't do it on the other railway. It's on some preserved line where they haven't got any coaches.
You see, James?
Said Percy triumphantly. Oh, well, if they haven't any coaches, that's different, James huffed. I'm sure the Fat Controller wouldn't approve, though.
Pooh!
Replied Percy cheekily.
Little you know.
He puffed away to collect some trucks from the harbour. Meanwhile, on the branch line, some passengers got out of Henrietta at the station by the airfield. They all went through the ticket barrier, except for two, a man and a woman. Ah, said the ticket inspector when he looked at their tickets, you've come too far. You should have got out at the last station. The passengers looked at him. Then they looked at each other and shook their heads. The last station. You must go back there. There was a pause. Then the man said something to his wife in a language the ticket inspector didn't understand. He asked the porter to bring the station master. A short time later, Percy came chuntering happily along the branch line with his train of trucks from the harbour. He saw the signal at the station by the airfield was set at danger, and the station master waiting for him on the platform.
Oh dear, there must have been an accident. I hope no one's hurt.
I'm giving the guard these two passengers to travel in his van, he told Percy. They're foreigners who came too far on Toby's train by mistake. Will you stop at the station by the river and let them off, please? Percy was confused.
Passengers? But this is a goods train.
That's right, Percy, said the station master. They're going to travel with the guard in his van.
But James says it's against it's not allowed, sir.
The station master laughed. James is right, Percy, but I don't think James or the Fat Controller would mind us helping two foreign visitors on our island who can't understand our language, do you? That made it all right, of course. The guard saw that his visitors were as comfortable as he could make them in his van, and when, a few minutes later, they reached the station they wanted, they came to the front of the train to see Percy. They nodded and smiled and shook hands with the driver and fireman. Then the guard showed them to a taxi, which was waiting to take them on the rest of their journey. A few weeks later, a parcel arrived with brightly coloured foreign stamps on the wrapping. Inside were warm new scarves and gloves for Percy's driver, fireman and guard, and a letter addressed to the Fat Controller, saying how splendid his railway was. Percy was proud, but he didn't tell James.
It might make him jealous,
He said to himself.
and that would never do.